Hey there, lovely people. Welcome to Be Your Best You with Tash and Becky, your go-to hangout for all things spiritual, subconscious, and downright magical. We're here to sprinkle a little mystical wisdom into your everyday life and help you level up your reality.
Picture this as your cosmic coffee date, where we chat about the unseen world, blend in some psychology vibes, and stir up the subconscious magic. Get ready to be the queen of your own reality, live a life that lights you up, and have a blast doing it.
So grab your latte or your tea and let's dive into another episode of Be Your Best You, where the mystical meets the mundane and your best life awaits.
Cheers to creating magic together.
Let's do this. Hi! Welcome back to another episode of Be Your Best You with Tash
And Becky, the guest edition.
Today we have Regan Caruthers on the phone.
On the phone!
Where did that come from?
That was funny.
Sorry, guys. Today we have Regan Caruthers on the show. Regan is a spiritual teacher, author, and founder of the Asset Yoga Center, where she teaches yoga as an active service and provides a variety of healing modalities to her community. A former executive in Silicon Valley and staff member at the HeartMath Institute, Regan is committed to sharing what she has learned to facilitate inner transformation and emphasizes the vitalness of discipline of practice to sustain inner change. We had an interesting conversation with Regan, actually. She's had an interesting life, hasn't she? And it actually all started from the age of 3, where she was sent to this school that was across the road from her, but it was like a spiritual school, wasn't it? So they were taught the power of positive thinking, and they'd start their day being told that they can create whatever, they can be whoever they want, they can create what they want, and did meditation. And her mum was very spiritual and very connected. She was very connected as a child, so she's gone through her life with a really interesting program. You know, we talk about programming. She's had a really interesting start to her programming, but she shares her journey where she became disconnected for quite a while, didn't she? And then the way the spiritual side of her came back in and ultimately saved her life.
Yeah, it's amazing,
and now how she lives her life, you know, with this kind of spiritual aspect. And she talks about all the things that Becky and I talk about on the show. It's really interesting to have it from her perspective and how the practices that she uses to stay connected with that spiritual part of her, that spiritual aspect of her, how she's dealt with her childhood trauma through it, and how she's used it to help her, you know, process her childhood trauma. Again, a lot of the similar stuff that we're talking about. And her life exemplifies how you can use this work that we talk about to actually, you know, live a life of peace and joy, and she's helping others with it. So anyway, we hope you enjoy our chat with Regan. Today we would like to welcome onto the show Regan. Regan, it's so lovely to have you. How are you?
It's great to be here. Yeah, it's sunny and warm today, so spring is springing, and that's such a hopeful time. Yeah.
Grey skies here in Southampton.
Standard, all part of the course. So Regan, would you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we'll dive in from there.
Yeah, that's a big question. So,
take your time.
Yeah, I'm a 58-year-old woman living in rural Missouri, about an hour outside of the city of St. Louis, where I grew up. And getting here to where I now am was certainly a unusual journey. I was born into some pretty chaotic circumstances.
That was a motorbike.
Wow. Yeah. Hi, Mom.
That was great timing.
Anyway, I had remarkable parents whose young lives were just like my mom used to say, you know, honey, when I talk about my young life, people think I'm a pathological liar. Anyway, they were larger than life. And my mother, who was very connected to multi-dimensions of living, didn't really know how to manage it. And she suffered a lot because of that. So it was as if she was connected to the energy of this place, right? So she would experience such clear seeing, had such remarkable capacity. And then she would suffer greatly, deeply depressed, sometimes unable to get out of bed. But the love that she was connected to, the love of God and what she could embody on a good day, was the most profound love I've ever known. My father didn't live with us. My mom kicked him out when I was 2. And when he died, he was characterized as the greatest legal mind of the second half of the 20th century in St. Louis.
Wow.
But he kind of left me to navigate my mother's mental illness and, the choices she would make from that place, including meeting the love of her life later in a mental hospital. That's not like a great place to meet a husband. So anyway, one of the most important decisions she made when I was 3 years old was to enroll me in a school in St. Louis, which was right across the street from Washington University, where we meditated every day and did Tai Chi for gym and photographed our energy field with Carillion film and began the day in devotional song, singing about the power of divine love and conscious thought, all the while later, learning algebra and Latin and reading Shakespeare, so it wasn't just, this school for more esoteric learning. As a hypnotherapist, you might have studied or come across the work of Maxwell Maltz.
Mm-hmm.
So he wrote the book Psycho-Cybernetics, which birthed the positive psychology movement. Well, he was on the board of my school. So a lot of the pedagogy, the songs that we sang were informed by his research. He was a plastic surgeon that noticed, gosh, not everybody, once I fix your disfigurement, feel great afterwards. Why is that? And, coming to understand that the story you tell yourself, right, is what you experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this school, we would sing songs like, it's up to you what you're gonna do with your life. It's up to you what you're gonna be. It's up to you. You've got the power to choose in your life. It's up to you to be free. Are you gonna have a good day? Will you live it in peace? You can learn to light your way. Just learn to pray without ceasing. Anyway, I know all the songs. I should probably, produce an album with them sometime.
Yes.
But, we're all programmed. And thankfully, I received a pretty remarkable program young. And that program helped me navigate the literal insanity of my childhood. And I don't know, really who I would be if I hadn't known it. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'd be exactly the same person. But as a young girl, I was very connected, like my mother, to other dimensions. And so I would see things that quote unquote normal people didn't see. I would hear things like your thoughts. If you're a little girl and you could hear somebody else's inner dialogue, you don't want to do that. That's not a positive experience most of the time. And I would see, entities, for lack of a better word, that sometimes really scared me. This one man in particular who would kind of follow me around. And the last time I saw him as a child, I was 9 years old and I was downstairs doing some gymnastics and dancing to get away from the chaos upstairs, turn the music on really loud. And there he was, like in this fiery throne, looking kind of demonic. And the terror I felt in my heart, I don't have words for. And I ran up the basement steps. And as I did, I screamed out loud, I want this all to stop. And it did, as if by command. The veil came down and I didn't have that extra load on my system. But I also didn't have any of the other gifts of that kind of connection either.
Yeah.
And I found myself kind of forsaking the teachings of my youth, as I just strived for social acceptance and to be part of conventional norms as an adolescent. And I needed safe places to be. My home was violent and emotionally abusive. And so sleepovers, that was my strategy. Be popular and have places to go.
Yeah.
So I wasn't, very quote unquote spiritual as a kid. I was kind and I knew that I had an intuitive kind of access, but I didn't really nurture it or spend much time in it, if that makes sense.
Can I just ask before you go on, when you said you shut it all down at 9, obviously you were experiencing the not so nice things, but when you said you also lost the nicer things, what were the nicer things that you got to have when you were 9? What was those kind of things like?
Feeling divine presence, right?
Mm.
Like feeling this quality of energy that I don't have words for. I mean, I've tried to describe it in my book. You don't know it until you know it, right? There's nothing I can say that is going to get you to know it. And in fact, years later, when I went to work at HeartMath and moved, from St. Louis, my mother's like, honey, nobody's going to change because they go to your workshop. And she was right. Anyway, so I lived, this conventional path, pretty disconnected from things I had known. And I was a junior executive in the publishing industry, academic publishing. I was 27, managing, I don't know, like $12 million in revenue for this global company. And I was in San Francisco at a national sales meeting. And again, I'm smoking my cigarettes and drinking a shot of vodka before I have to go and present to these shadowy executives. I mean, I'm good-hearted, but not spiritual. I don't have a practice. And my best friend from childhood, whose home was a safe haven of mine growing up, came to visit, and she wanted a job in San Francisco. So I said, "Oh, come stay in my suite. I'll take good care of you." And she's like, "Great." So she comes mid-meeting, and she brings with her the book Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. I don't know if you've ever read that book, and if you haven't, you should. And I open it, it's like Christ consciousness, this and that. And I looked at Heidi and I said, "I love you, and I don't have time for this." And off I went to, lead my next session. So on this fateful night at this national sales meeting, Heidi is in the city socializing. I just want a decent night's sleep. There's so much bad executive behavior going on in my company. I learned that a mentor's been raped. I mean, it's just a shit show. And I just want a decent night's sleep. So I go to bed fairly early. And sometime in the middle of the night, I wake up and I haven't yet opened my eyes. But that same sense of terror that I felt as a kid was so present. And I opened my eyes, and there at the end of my bed is the same entity that used to follow me around as a kid. And I just looked at him. Now, keep in mind, I was kind of fighting the good fight within my corporate life. I was courageous. And anyway, after I found out about the rape, I was just like, enough. And there he was. And I just looked at him and I said, "Oh, it's you. It's only you. I'm not afraid of you." And I went back to bed.
Oh, that's amazing.
And when I woke up the next morning, all I could feel was unconditional love and oneness.
Wow.
And I just wanted to talk to my mom because I was so connected. I understood everything. And I didn't know how long this was going to last, as sudden as it came, it could suddenly leave. And I couldn't reach her. And the only person I could reach by phone, because keep in mind, I'm in San Francisco and home is still St. Louis at this time. The only person I could reach is my stepfather, this man who was a source of violence and emotional abuse most of my life. And I just told him I had nothing but love for him. And that's exactly how I felt. I mean, at the level of my cells, right? I felt nothing but God's love and such compassion for him and what he had endured, right? That he was just living out from his traumatic, selves, right? And as I shared with him what I was, feeling, not just my love and that I had completely forgiven him. And I said to him, the only reason we're here is to learn how to embody the love of God. There is no other purpose. So he drops the phone. Keep in mind, this man has Comanche bloodlines. That was like one of the more violent indigenous tribes here in the United States. Sicilian and a Scorpio, right? That's a lot. He drops the phone and he comes back a few seconds later and he says, "Blonde Beauty, I don't have an explanation. But a golden eagle just landed on the crabapple tree in the backyard. And then the phone drops again. He comes back a second later. He said, Regan, now there's a red fox at the base of the tree looking up at the eagle. Well, as you may know, in indigenous culture and Native American culture, the eagle represents the divine, and the red fox represents a noble messenger. So from that moment on, this was over 30 years ago, he's a kind and gentle man. So the energetic transmission, right, the complete embodiment of the love of God, which I woke up with, changed him. And, I changed too.
That's, wow.
Unbelievable.
And there was, that just happened that night. There was no kind of reason you can think of. It wasn't like you were calling out for, help, I need to change. It just kind of happened.
No, I mean, if like chain smoking Marlboro Lights and drinking Cosmos, if that's preparation, then yeah, I was prepared. Yeah, I can't explain it other than it brought me back to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And to the self that I think I've always been, right, over the course of my soul history as a spiritual teacher, as a seer. Yeah. So, but I'm 27. So I don't know. I get back to St. Louis, my first husband, and that was a pretty chaotic relationship, though. Gosh, I love him so much. Anyway, we conceived, our first child the day I returned from San Francisco. So, I do feel like my older son is quite lucky in a way. I'm sure luck had something to do with it, but he came in, and when my husband and I were making love, I knew that he had entered me, his spirit, and I welcomed him. He's living a conventional life in Silicon Valley. We'll see if he, has a breakthrough like his mother did. I don't know. He's a good-hearted, earnest man for sure. But anyway, I found myself, a few years after that, moving to California to become, part of the staff of the HeartMath Institute, where I was leading retreats and programs for business audiences with Bruce Cryer, who was the CEO of HeartMath at that time.
Can you just tell our audience a little bit about what HeartMath is? Because we were just saying before we press record that I've heard of HeartMath and I'm very aware of it, but most people don't really, especially over here, I think, aren't aware of it. So can you just tell everyone a bit more about what it is and what it does?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of your listeners probably know Dr. Joe Dispenza because I would imagine he's wonderful and he's a very good marketer.
Yeah.
So when he talks about coherence, heart-brain coherence, he's referring to what the HeartMath Institute discovered. And he often has HeartMath researchers at his programs, helping with the data collection and everything. But what HeartMath is fundamentally, right, and this is, my point of view, is they took ancient wisdom and they packaged it for the Western mind. So, they wanted to prove through their research the central role the heart plays in your health, your quality of thinking, your quality of life. And that when we consciously connect to feelings of love and gratitude, everything changes physiologically, right? You change biochemically for the better. You create a coherent rhythm in your heart, which looks like a sine wave, actually, when you're feeling love and gratitude. It's like these gentle hills. And that quality of energy, right, that rhythm is what then gets communicated up the vagus nerve to the brain. So, it explains like when you're angry, you say something stupid.
Yeah.
Because actually in that energetic state of anger, you can't access the higher reasoning centers of the brain. So when we're loving, when we're grateful, we're smarter, we're healthier, and we have greater capacity for intuition. And all of this has been proven in over 400 clinical studies that HeartMath has done. And their big breakthrough study was published just right around the time I came to work with them in the American Journal of Cardiology, where they showed the heart rate variability difference, right? The difference in your heart rhythm and the emotional state of frustration contrasted with appreciation. And then all the things that meant, right? And so HeartMath now is three things primarily. There's still a research, institute, continuing their research. They've developed tools and methods for people to learn how to emotionally self-regulate, how to create optimal physiological coherence, right, in the body. And then they have technology where you can see that. So you can see in real time the rhythm of your heart when you practice HeartMath. You can get a read, it's an estimate, right, of how much coherence you're creating in your system. So they, it's like biofeedback technology in a way. And and they have an app that's free. I really, recommend it in that a lot of their research is summarized there. All of their techniques are available there. And then the thing that you pay for is a sensor that you buy from them that connects to your phone via Bluetooth in the app. And then that's what measures your heart rate variability and your coherence. But you can learn a lot about HeartMath just from their free app. It's a very generous thing that they've created.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. Yeah. I would definitely recommend people checking out, just giving it a Google, checking it out, because we all like to see the scientific evidence, don't we? And it's right there, isn't it, for you? And it helps you take these. Often people think these concepts of woo-woo, like be grateful, show gratitude, and actually shows you why the gratitude works. And again, like we always say in the podcast, don't we? You have to think on that we are energy. Everything is think about it on an energetic level. And when you think about, your heart, like its magnetic field and your brain's magnetic field, of course it's all energy and it's all working together. And HeartMath can show you how, and you can see it in real time, so that when you're doing your gratitude journaling, you are actively making your heart and brain sync up together, and good things come from that, doesn't it?
Yeah. And what I will say though, it's the feeling quality. It's not thinking about what you're grateful for.
Yeah, that's everything we've been talking about lately.
That if that worked, then therapy would cure everybody. But it doesn't, because people tend to go and just talk about the same old stuff, fortifying all their neural architecture around the energetics of the problem, therefore attracting through energetic resonance more of the problem. Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all about the sincere feeling. That's where the magic is. And so, I changed my life, and my first husband was, supportive and sold his companies, and out we moved to California. Like I talk about in the book, my first day of work at HeartMath, I felt like I had made a colossal mistake. So just not a fit organizationally. I'll just leave it at that, though. I will say what they've created is life-changing. So I don't want anyone to not practice what they have created, because it just wasn't my place. And the way they're structured, and I'm not a good follower. And I believe in sovereignty. And so anyway, I just worked there for about a year before I knew I needed to change. And frankly, the economics of my household at that time was pretty dire. Again, I talk about all of this in the book, and I needed to go back to work, because working at HeartMath, I was basically a renunciate, working $12 an hour. Like, can't live in Santa Cruz, one of the most expensive places to live in the world, on $12 an hour. Anyway, and the only work I'd known was academic publishing. So I found myself back in that world in 2001, and spent, most of my professional years in the education industry, working both on the content side as well as for venture funded early stage companies that were trying to innovate the higher education, the university experience here. All the while trying to integrate, all that I'd known, all that I'd experienced. But I wasn't disciplined. I was focused on making a living. I was a single mother because I divorced my first husband finally after so much tumult. And it wasn't until I really became disciplined again that I could find this middle way, for lack of a better word, where I can spend time in the quiet, cultivating my connection to God's love, bringing that in, continuing to heal from all the trauma that I've known as Regan, as well as all the other trauma. We're never done. Sorry, listeners, you're never done. A soul history to heal too. So anyway, I got the directive to write my story about 10 years ago. And I just kept saying to God, yes, later, yes, later, yes, later. And then COVID happened, and that really kind of changed a lot for me in that I really, this community that I had been a part of in Santa Cruz for so long that I thought was pretty spiritually mature, it wasn't. Right. You don't make the kinds of decisions that I saw my community make as a response to their fear, right? So much of what we do because we're afraid to die.
Yeah.
And I just saw that and I was just like, oh, whoa, these aren't my people. This isn't my place. And that was very, kind of unsettling. And I didn't yet know where God wanted me to be. And I went to Joshua Tree outside of Palm Springs to continue working on my book because, we were locked down in California for almost 2 years. It was pretty dystopian. You couldn't be on a public beach without getting, escorted by a cop with an AK-47. It was nuts. Oh my gosh. And you couldn't, I couldn't dine in restaurants without proof of vaccination. I wasn't going to get vaccinated. God said, no way. And I'm like, okay. Wasn't invited to parties because I was unvaccinated. It was nuts. No offense, dear friends back in California, but I really think the left coast has lost its mind.
Wow.
And so I went to work on the book in Joshua Tree, get away from home and just have some privacy. In meditation, I was told I needed to urgently move home. And home was St. Louis. I was living in a beautiful home right on Monterey Bay, one of the most gorgeous places in the world. And people are like, huh? Because as soon as I got that call in meditation, I literally come out of meditation, look at my phone to see if I have enough bars to make a phone call because I'm in the high desert. And I did. And I called a friend in St. Louis who was a realtor. And I said, God says I have to urgently move home, and I do what I'm told. So I flew out, the next morning with her help to see, where I was supposed to be. And that was Washington, Missouri, of all places, a place I'd never been. When God said Franklin County, I was like, I don't even know what that means. Told my realtor and then found this place. And what's so amazing about it, there's so many amazing aspects to this part of the journey, but in the description of the home where I now live, so I have 10 acres and there's a 3,000 square foot garage that I converted into my yoga center because I'm a 500 hour trained yoga teacher. Anyway, there was nothing in the description of this place about its having its own water. And, living in a drought in California for as long as I did, I really think water sovereignty is going to matter. Maybe not in my lifetime, but certainly in my children's lifetime. I think it's going to be what wars are fought about, anyway, it's just, it matters. And there was nothing about that in the description. And I said to my friend, well, let's go see it anyway. Checks all the other boxes. You can't have everything. And so we get here and Dale, the owner, comes up the expansive driveway in a golf cart because that's how you kind of tool around this gorgeous place. And he comes up, to greet us. And I think maybe I've waved, but I haven't said a thing. And he looks at me and goes, oh, young lady, I should let you know we have a geothermal well here.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, God, got it. I didn't go into the house yet. And I knew. I was like, okay, God, got it. This is where I'm supposed to be. Yeah, and so, sold my home, so I got the directive to urgently move home in December of 21, and we were here in March, and
That's crazy.
that was fast, and
Yeah.
my younger son was like, "Mom, I don't know who you're connected to, but I don't know why they would say this." He was born in Santa Cruz, he lived at the beach,
Yeah.
and we're moving, where it's 100 degrees and humid in the summer and below 0 in the winter. It's like he's like, "Mom, what?"
Why?
Yeah, and then a few months after getting settled in, and I was working on the plans to renovate this big garage that, prior to it becoming a yoga, or what I like to say, come work on your shit center. It was like a party building and a place for the owner, Dale, to park his tractors and stuff. So anyway, I was working on the redesign of that. I was teaching yoga on my back lawn, free as an act of service, which is what I continue to do. And again, I meditate and pray every day. That's, what I've been doing for quite a long time. And on this fateful day in meditation, I'm told I have to urgently go to a doctor. So in these two directives, urgent is a word, and there's no fear that's being communicated. It's just clear. It's just clear and matter of fact. So I look on Google, to find a doctor in my new town. And, one of the advantages of living out in the country is you can see a doctor right away, right? So I made an appointment to see him the following day after God telling me I had to go see a doctor. And what do doctors do? They listen to your heart. And he does. And he said, Regan, there's a really loud murmur. Something is wrong. We got to get you scheduled for an echocardiogram as quickly as possible, which was the following day. Again, another advantage of living out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Wow.
And so a day later is when I learned I was dying and that I had a congenital heart defect. I was born with a broken heart, which actually, if you know my story, makes a lot of sense. And the only solution was open heart surgery. And so moved here in March, was directed by God to go to a doctor in June, and had open heart surgery to replace my aortic valve in July.
That's just a whirlwind.
Yeah, but I'm not afraid of death, so I was fine. I learned post awakening, and that consciousness lasted for about 3 years. But in navigating things that happened to me at night post awakening, which I didn't really talk about earlier, anyway, I was greeted by a lot of dark energy, and I learned in time how to love it. And once I learned how to love the dark energy, they stopped visiting. But one of the aspects of those visitations is that I was taken out of my body against my will.
Oh, wow.
Kind of like Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. I don't know if you saw the early movies, not the dumb ones that are recent, but the
original
early ones. Yeah. When Luke is training to be a Jedi and he's in that dark portal and he's confronting Darth Vader and all sorts of other dark stuff. Because, as my guides told me one fateful day, if you want to be an instrument of the light, you need to understand how to navigate darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, that's not anything spiritual teachers want to talk about, but it's the truth. And so in experiencing bodily exit, right, being able to look at my body in bed, but I'm not there, and then learning, and then the yoga tradition speaks of this, but learning how to do that myself, willfully.
Come out of your body.
Yeah, leave and come back. And I don't do that anymore. It's not recreational. It's just like once you experience it, learn the lesson, which is you're not your body.
Yeah.
So there's no fear of the body dying. Like, that's silly. If you're not the body, like, whatever. I mean, I don't mean to be cavalier about it, but almost.
Yeah.
Almost cavalier in that when you know, and you live differently in that knowing, which is, why I had such a different experience, I think, of COVID, and why I could greet, sudden death, right? I mean, the only thing that changed was my awareness that I was dying.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There was like maybe a time scale on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've had compassion for my kids, my husband, who don't have the same certainty that I do. But yeah, when I woke up in the ICU after a very long surgery, way longer than it was supposed to take because It was the worst aortic valve my surgeon had ever seen in over 40 years of being a surgeon. But when I woke up in the ICU, I expected to be there. Like I knew I would survive it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when my surgeon came to see me on my day of discharge, which was just a few days after surgery, he let me know that there was no clinical explanation of how I was alive. And I said, well, do you believe in Jesus Christ? I said, and I asked that from a very wide point of view. He said, I do. I said, well, that's the only explanation I have. And then months later, the scar on my chest changed shape and I have a crucifix on my chest. Probably hard for you to see. He might be able to see it. I don't know. Because it's very faint.
Yeah, it's because it's a bit grainy at the moment, our end, so we can't see it. But afterwards, when we watch it back, we might be able to see it. So maybe we will. We'll have to check that.
And the scar itself is quite faint. If you've ever seen somebody with an open heart surgery scar.
No,
I haven't.
Well, they're usually thick and kind of rubbery.
Yeah, I can imagine it. Like that.
That's what I would have thought it to be.
Mine you can barely see.
Wow.
Though it doesn't.
And I believe my spiritual practice, some of which was informed by my time at HeartMath, but my practice is about going back to the energetics of my awakening, right? It's like a new reference point, a new baseline. And I don't operate from that place all the time, right? I'm not Jesus, but I know what it feels like.
Yeah.
And I can reconnect to it.
Yes.
And so that's my practice, is reconnecting to that quality of love and literally bringing it to my heart. And I think that's what kept me alive.
Yeah. And also, I suppose, again, your fear of, you were accepting of death, weren't you? And I truly think that acceptance has such a big part to play, doesn't it? When you're because then it opens you up to imagining that everything's going to be okay. You can do it. You have to have the acceptance that everything's not going to be okay to be able to really fully step into that everything is going to be okay. And then I think that really helps, doesn't it? Because it puts you in the right state of mind.
And have a good definition of what okay means.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'd really like to talk about your spiritual kind of practices more, because I know we were talking about before, you feel very strongly about being disciplined, because this kind of work, and Becky and I, we always talk about this, don't we? We always say the work is never done. Sorry, it's a never ending journey, but that's a good thing because it's just growth and it's fun and along the way. But also you do have to put the work in, and we say work.
Yeah, we don't like saying work, do we? So that sounds heavy. You want to encourage and lighten that up a bit for them, don't you? Because it makes you want to do the work, doesn't it? Then
but it has to be consistent, and you have to have go-to practices that you fall back to, and I'd be really interested to hear kind of what your practices are and how you maintain that discipline, so others can kind of see what it takes.
I mean, on my Instagram I try to share some of this, like the rituals and the prayers and the meditations. I mean, they're brief because, everybody's got a very short attention span for most of this. But for me, it begins walking down my driveway from my home into my yoga center. I burn Palo Santo, which is wonderful, and I pray. So as I light it, I offer my prayer, and my prayer is really always the same. And I pray for, my guides and my guardians, ancestors of the highest vibration and intention, Yeshua, which is the Aramaic pronunciation of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and Aset. You know her as Isis, but her actual name is Aset. She was Egyptian. The Greeks called her Isis. Yeah, and I invoke, God, along with, all the others I've named, to be with me. And I ask every morning to be an agent of the highest good, to live my highest timeline, and for the resources, the insights, and the people that I need to support that to come forth. And I always ask in this prayer to embody the consciousness of the Christ. And then I walk the perimeter of my center with my Palo Santo, which takes, a minute or two. And then I sit and, it depends how long. And I just connect to that energy of divine love, consciously just kind of sitting in it. And I do that for as long as I feel that I should. Not that there's a should, but, you just kind of feel it.
Feels right.
And
Yeah.
then, throughout the day, I don't know how many times, but the day is filled with prayer and meditation, taking those micro moments and just becoming aware of where am I? My first spiritual teacher, the founder of my grade school, when we would sit in meditation after we sang, she didn't do this all the time, but sometimes she would ask us 3 questions. Who are you? Where are you? And why are you? And you couldn't say, I'm Regan sitting on the living room rug. And, no. And she wanted us to understand that where you are in thought determines your location. Rarely,
Yeah.
we're usually somewhere else in the past or,
Projecting into the anxious future.
So I really have developed a practice where I kind of check in with myself. I don't like time my watch. I don't even have a watch. I don't put anything on my phone. It's intuitive. If I notice that, I'm somewhere other than where I actually am, I become mindfully present.
Yeah.
And again, ask for that energy of the Christ, right? That consciousness of the Christ, what Jesus was trying to teach us.
Yes.
And we seem to be kind of, losing the point. But anyway, just, bringing that in and always asking for help. And if I have, something that's challenging to deal with, which of course I do, I'm human, right?
Yeah.
Not looking at my will or my ego as the place to find the answer.
God, don't we all need to do that? That's what we all need to.
Asking for divine will.
Yeah.
And, if I have a conflict with, let's say, a child, more often than not, I try to resolve it by praying for the highest good. And that's what I did, prior to surgery. I didn't pray to be healed. I didn't, pray, for an outcome. Because what do I know? I don't know what's in my highest. That could have been death. I'm not going to take that away from myself. So I'm always praying for divine will, right? For the highest good and for me to live in accordance with that will. And I didn't always do that.
You're human.
I didn't always do that, but in high ratios, a majority of the time, I will say I do that now.
Yeah, that's and I do think, like, I totally agree with that, with this always asking to guide you to your highest good, because so often we think we know what our highest good is and we don't, and that's when you can kind of get stuck, isn't it? If you have this, your mind set on a particular outcome because you think that's the best for you, you could be limiting yourself, or you're going to set yourself up for upset or discomfort, any of that. When you can truly have that faith and trust that these unseen forces, the universe, God, the divine, angels, whatever your terminology that you like to use, is helping you and wants to get you to your highest timeline, your best good. When you can absolutely trust that, it gives you the strength and the courage to go through those difficult times or the tough times, because you're always thinking, but this is for the best. And no matter how difficult things get, you're like, but this is gonna all work out for me. And if you can hold that faith, everything does always work out for you, doesn't it? I do think it's the only way for us all to go as a collective now, isn't it? With everything that's going on with the world, we don't know what's happening. It's all very uncertain, but I think that this has to happen in order for us to get somewhere where we can't even imagine, we could be, but we have to have the trust and the faith that this is all working out for our highest good. And if you can use that as your guiding star, I think you're always going to be okay.
Yeah, and while I don't want to make anybody wrong, I would say to be cautious about praying to the universe. There's a lot in the universe you don't want to be aligned to.
Yeah, and it's your intention, isn't it? I do agree with you. You have to, for your highest good. I mean, I always disclaim it with, for my highest good, benevolent beings who are working to help me for my highest good and humanity's highest good, the highest good of all, is like disclaimer after disclaimer. But I do totally get, and I think you're right. We don't talk about the darker parts of these things. Becky and I, we've done a few episodes on, so I've had, as a child, I had a lot of like darker experiences where, actually very similar to you, I had a time, I was a bit older than you, I was about 12, and I had enough of the dark stuff at night when I tried, and I said, that's it, I turned my light off, I'm done, I don't want you to come anywhere near me, and bam, just like you, it was gone for a long time. And I was very disconnected for a long time, apart from an occasional darker thing would creep in every now and then, but for the most part it was okay. And we spoke a lot of our episodes about how, actually, when we first awoke and back into this world, we had to face the dark. It was facing and acknowledging that there is darker things out there, but the light has, the power. We have, sovereignty, and we can kind of beat that, so to speak. But you have to acknowledge that it's there, and know that you have the power to tell it to go away if you don't want it, kind of thing. But it was a really big part of us stepping into this, wasn't it, to acknowledge it. And I know a lot of people were like, oh, we didn't like that podcast episode, it freaked us out a little bit. But I think it does have to be spoken about, doesn't it? Because it's not all light and airy fairy and wonderful and rainbows, and it goes, you can use that as well to go back to kind of your psyche as well. Obviously, doing the work that I do, it's great to work on positive thinking and manifesting all the great stuff, but actually you have to dive into your shadow parts, the darker parts of you, in order to be able to embrace the light too, because it's everything. Everything's part, it's all part of a whole, and you have to acknowledge it to kind of accept yourself and move forward, I think, personally. But yeah, could you talk more about that just briefly on, be careful asking the universe to help you? Be interested to hear your view.
I think if you can't say God, you have work to do in terms of, however that word has been misused in your, upbringing. But I do believe that naming it that, understanding what that truly means, is an important part of the process. And, for each of us to have a practice where we are consciously trying to connect to the love of God, and to bring that in, and to bring that in to all the dark, shadowy places inside of ourselves. So that, that was my process. And again, I didn't read it in a book. I mean, I'm sure I've been informed by many teachers, but what I chose to do was look at different developmental stages, like birth to 3, 3 to 6, etc., and really get honest about what I had known, what I had experienced, what was the way that I coped with that chunk of time, and what was the belief system that was imprinted, either explicitly or tacitly, and get real clear on who is in there. And often those aspects of ourselves have competing points of view, right? My little inner toddler, where my mom found me making my own sandwich at 15 months old, well, she's not wrong to believe that she can't trust anybody. So it's not about making her wrong or changing her mind. It's about accessing divine love, bringing that energy to her and holding loving witness and saying, I'm here. I'm not going to abandon you. And I'm just going to radiate this love to you until you believe that you're safe and that you're loved. And you do that, with all of these traumatized parts of you. You can name them, give them different names. Because usually when you're emotionally reacting, right, when you're having a quote unquote emotional reaction, as much as you think it's about what that person said or blah, blah, blah. No, it's your traumatized self that feels threatened for some reason. And so the more you can bring more conscious awareness to that, to all those that's, right? All those people in there, and bring love to them, right? And this is why the HeartMath method is so valuable, in that, your amygdala is what stores all your emotional memories, and it's always looking for matches, and its aim is to keep you safe. So you're at work and a new guy is hired and he looks just like a bully you knew in grade school. Well, you immediately hate him. And he's a really nice guy, but you are triggered, right? I mean, that's a very sort of silly example, but to make a point, right? And so in the HeartMath process, or in a process called metta in Buddhism, which is the same, when you're just connecting to the energy of love. And typically, as you learn to do this, it's through an emotional memory when you felt that way, right? That's what brings you there. Well, the brain doesn't know the difference between something you're experiencing in real time or a memory you're recalling, right? And so the more you're recalling these loving moments in time and feeling it, right? And you have a memory associated with it to help you get there. Well, the amygdala, that's getting stored in the amygdala too. And then over time, you're a lot less triggered because the ratio of memory in the amygdala has changed, and you've begun to truly wire your neural architecture around divine love. So when somebody does something, you're like, I mean, again, not to be cavalier, but you're kind of like, whatever, right? That's person's stuff. And when I went to see the founder of my grade school when I was pregnant with my first son, and she was a chain smoking, whiskey drinking mystic. Anyway, I asked her, what did she hope the lasting legacy of our education was? And she didn't hesitate. I mean, in a second, not even like a nanosecond, she looked at me and she goes, I wanted you to know that every thought and feeling you have is your choice.
Yeah. If only all schools could be that way.
Yeah, no, tell me about it.
We don't have anything like that here, do we? Not that I know of.
And that's so true, because with every single one of my clients, no matter what I'm working with them for, my first hypnosis with them is programming that they always have a choice. Yes. You get to choose whether you feel good or whether you feel bad, whether you feel anxious or, calm. And that's my first one I do with everyone. And all of my clients say the same thing. I love that one. That's my favorite one. Whenever I'm struggling.
Though, doesn't it? It also triggers a lot of people. When I've said that to them, you've got a choice.
Yeah.
Some people don't like that.
No, they don't like that. No, they don't. The people that I'm working with, that doesn't trigger them because they're ready. They've come to me because they're ready for it. But people who aren't ready for it, that does trigger them. But it's just the most empowering, freeing concept, isn't it? You have a choice. You always have a choice.
Yeah, and we have language, he makes me mad.
Yeah.
As if you have nothing to do with it. Yeah. Right? And we're assigning blame.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no liberation in that.
No.
And I tell my clients, because I do what I call inner life coaching, it's like, as long as your experience is determined by someone else's choice, you will remain feeling powerless. Yes. Because you're riding that roller coaster. As much as you think that, that person is impacting your quality of life. Yeah, no.
Yeah. I totally agree. And if everyone can understand, when everyone understands that, that's when everything opens up to you, doesn't it? And it doesn't mean that it becomes easy breezy, but that's where the hard work begins, actually, because now you're conscious and you're aware that you have a choice, and now you've got responsibility, haven't you? You have to do it. But with that being said, you know you're in control. You know that is the one and only thing you can control is yourself and your choice. That's a really powerful place to be, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And my Ready to Awaken courses, we spend 3 weeks in a 9-week course on what I call the responsibility of self.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. That doesn't surprise me.
No.
It's everything. It's the foundation of everything, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, before that is the energy of love, right? Because if you don't have that,
Yes, that's what I wanted to ask you as well, because from, a lot of the people that I see that I work with, we are working on self-love. A lot of them have been given themselves away to other people, and they really struggle with that love for themselves. And when you were saying about, you have to bring in that divine love and give that to the parts of you, sometimes it's easy to do. If I take them back to a time in their life where they were upset as a child, sometimes it's easy to just love that child and say, I'm here for you. It is. There's other times though, I think, like, especially I notice anyway in the work that I do, as people get older, it's harder for the more recent things, it's harder to bring that love in. So how, I'm sure there are people sat listening thinking, yeah, but how do I bring that love in? How do I get myself to love that part of me? And again, I think you're going to answer, you're going to come back and say it does take practice. You can't just think, I'm going to give love. But could you just, and I'm asking, I think for myself as well, I'm like really curious, because I do think I struggle sometimes to bring in that love for myself and just love those parts of me. It's something I'm trying to work on right now. So how would you suggest that the best way to do that? And do you have to keep practicing? What is it? Like, how do you do it? You obviously are very connected to it now because you feel it. And I do know what you mean. I have glimpses of that, like that divine love. Like I don't use the word God. That's my own, the way I've been brought up. Actually, my feelings from as a child, the word God, though I believe in God, I tend to use the word divine source. I truly believe that there is God, and it's not the God that everyone thinks sat on a throne with a white beard. Like, no. And I believe that like God is in all of us, like we are sparks of God, though I don't say the word God. But anyway, I have like felt that love, which I can only perceive as being from God, from that source. But it's flickering, and it's like I can't grab it all the time. And like, how do you bring that in all the time? I find it quite easy to do for other people. I find it much harder to do for myself. And I think I find that with a lot of my clients as well. So sorry, that's why I'm asking that question on that kind of basis.
So, what I would suggest for anyone, focus on the deepest, most profound love you've ever felt. Right. And that can be different for everybody. It could be a love of a pet. It could be the love of God. Like there's a range of experience. Start there.
Yeah.
And in your quiet time, you sit, spine straight, focus first on your breath. Just try to bring mindful present, bring yourself into the present moment through. Yeah, I think the easiest way to do that is just to focus on the breath until you're focusing less and less on other things, right? And then remember that moment when you felt that way and experience it again with no intention other than to feel it, right? And so you bring that in, you remember it, you remember what it feels like, you feel it, and then the mind comes in, like, well, what about the laundry? And you got to go to the grocery store, like whatever. And so then you reconnect with the breath, ideally through the heart. Like it's a heart-centered breath, I think is the most transformative as it relates to this particular process. And then you go back to re-experiencing the feeling. And you just practice that so that a year from now, if you're doing that every day, it's easier to do it. There's less interruption of the mind. You're more able to sustain your connection to that feeling. And so because everything's energy, you do that enough, right? And that becomes your new sort of emotional baseline, like your energetic baseline. Well, think of it kind of like a ladder. Then it's easier to get to another level of love. Not that any of this is linear per se, but it is, as it relates to energy and vibration, right? There is some aspect of lower to higher, right? And I think it just kind of naturally, this has been my experience, evolves, right? So maybe you've started with a love of a pet, but that love is profound. I mean, the love I feel for my cat, I don't have words for, right? So you just bring that in and sit with it and feel it for as long as you can.
Yeah. And then you can start giving that to yourself. Once you've built that and you can just grasp that feeling like that, then you can start giving it to yourself in
Yeah,
whatever
and I
situation.
think doing that unpacking of the developmental stages, really
Mhm.
knowing who's in there. And that's important because you may be confronting a traumatized, part of you that's resisting, right?
Yeah,
But if
absolutely.
you've done that unpacking, you know why that part of you resists,
Yeah.
right?
And that's the work that I do with my clients. That's what we're doing, that unpacking, that understanding of that inner child and adult, but yeah, I totally agree with
And
you.
so sometimes it can be a little more impersonal in that, if somebody says, well, I can't love myself, I don't know what that means. Well, you know what it means to feel love or
Mm-hmm.
gratitude. So just bring that consciously, that feeling quality into your consciousness. Start
Mm.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think again, like from you saying that as well, it just comes back to that whole, it can't be up here. It just has to be felt. And you, when you feel it, it's going to spread to yourself as well, isn't it? When you're trying to think about giving yourself love, it doesn't work, does it?
No, you're just in the vibration of love.
Mm.
And then maybe you visualize your inner toddler who's
Mm.
like, F you. I got to do everything myself. I don't trust anybody. Like that part of you isn't going to be like, oh, thank you so much. No, it's going to take time, but you keep
Yeah.
showing up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You keep saying, I'm just going to hold this love. It's my
Yeah.
offering
Yeah.
with no expectation other than
Mm.
I'm just here loving. I'm just this agent of love that I've, chosen to connect to.
Mm.
I mean, it could be a
Mm.
love of a sunset, a love of a flower, your favorite ice
Mm.
cream. I mean, I don't care. Start wherever you can
Yeah.
because what matters is the sincerity
Yeah.
of the feeling.
Yeah.
So don't
Yeah.
try to do something that you're like, that you don't believe. You're wasting your
Mm-hmm.
time. So do whatever you can, where you can sincerely feel it.
Yeah.
Maybe you start with ice cream. That's okay.
Yeah, and you're right, and that just goes back to kind of what we were saying before, and what you feel passionate about, which is the discipline. It's like and everyone thinks you have to do it for hours, or no, just even if you do it for 2 minutes a day, start, build. It's the consistency, it's the continual practice, isn't it? And holding steady, trusting that even some days you might have really great meditations. Sometimes I have where I'm like, oh my god, I feel the love, I'm crying because I feel the love, and other days I can't get anything, and that's okay. Just keep showing up. I think that's really important as well, isn't it?
Yeah, because wherever you are energetically when you begin, you'll be in a better place when you end. Right? So, like if I'm in menopause, sometimes I get a really shitty night's sleep. So do I wake up like, all connected to God? No. No. And so it just means in my practice that day, yes, I'm getting to a higher vibration. I'm getting to a more felt sense of love from where I started. And there's tremendous benefit to that biochemically, energetically, cognitively. Yeah, so it's never a waste.
No, yes, exactly. It's never a waste.
Never.
It's never a waste.
Just
I think
do
that's
it.
that's so important. It's never a waste, and a short time is better than no time at all. It's really important, isn't it, to keep that consistency going. Regan, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Can you just tell everyone a little bit about your book and where they can find it?
Oh, yeah, sure. So my memoir is called Tragic Magic, and they can find it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble as an ebook or a paperback, whatever they prefer. So, yeah, that would be wonderful. I think they'll find comfort in the story. I think they'll find inspiration in the story, and I think they'll be able to relate to the mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's messy. So that's one way to connect. They can visit my website at regancaruthers.com. I have some, stories I've written, and there's a breathwork practice and a beginner's meditation and some other things to support their journey. And if they want to work with me as their inner life coach, we can certainly do that remotely. So they can schedule a free discovery call through my website. Yeah. And so we get to know each other, and you share your goals. I share my approach. And if you feel resonant, then we begin. So that's another thing they can do. And then on Instagram, I do try to share 4 videos, sometimes 5 a week, just different things that are coming through that I want to share with people. So they can find me at Regan Caruthers on Instagram or Facebook if they're interested in, getting to know me a little bit that way.
That's brilliant. And I will put all the links in the show notes as well. Brilliant. Well,
that was lovely.
Thank you so much,
you,
Regan. It's an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you for having me. And if you ever want to see Middle America.
Yes.
Yeah. And when we stop the recording, I'll turn the computer around so you can see my studio.
Yes.
Ooh,
I really want to see your yoga studio. And I love the idea of just driving around on a golf buggy around your land. Like, that just sounds like the dream. I'm there. Right. Okay. Everyone, we will see you in the next episode. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.